Welcome back to News Talk and our conversation this time with our special guest, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. We'll be going to the phones in just a moment. We'll begin, I should say, with you, Robert, on line one. I believe we have lines open at 703-387-1020. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion for Mayor Bowser, we're going to be going to the phones, as I say, momentarily, beginning with Robert. So sit tight if you're on the line. Grab an open line if you choose to do that. Mayor, can you talk about the new push for full representation for residents of the District of Columbia? There's talk of a constitutional convention.
Sure.
There's reference to the approach that Tennessee took very successfully when the residents of that territory wanted admission to the Union. Possibly something on the ballot this fall?
Sure. Well, that's our push. What we want to do is have a package ready to go for the new president and new Congress, and that affirms that D.C. residents want full representation. And to get to full representation, 2 senators and a voting member, or however much our population dictates, of the House, we have to be a state, and we can be a state by simple legislation. So what I have called on is a ballot question that is a fresh question before the voters of the District of Columbia to be put on the ballot in November. So I'm working with Chairman Mendelson and the D.C. Statehood Commission to move a piece of legislation to the council to request that question on the ballot.
Are there parts of this fight that you view as particularly important? Is it the classic inside game of working with lawmakers? Is it getting the business community involved? Is it getting as many citizens involved as possible? Is it having celebrities who can shine a spotlight on it? I know you're going to say all of the above, but I'm curious to get more of your thinking on the strategy.
This is what we think. We know that when the last time we had a very favorable political situation, Democrats had the House and the White House and the Senate, and we also had a president that went in and that was facing a financial collapse and also moving health care reform. So the issue of D.C. statehood wasn't top of mind because of those very serious national issues. And we also didn't go with this approach. And this approach was what Tennessee did, to have voters ratify, have a constitution approved, have boundaries approved before the Congress acts. Our approach has been to have a bill before the Congress and wait for the Congress to act. So we want to hit it 2 ways. We want the citizens to speak and speak loudly in November and present that information, hopefully to a very favorable political situation, starting with the White House.
The notion that if you pay taxes, you should be a full citizen, that notion is as old as the Republic,
you
right?
got it.
Predates the Republic. And if you look at the size of the district, we're bigger than some states. That part of it is a no-brainer. But some people say it's just too small. An area this small doesn't feel like a state, and you've got opposition that's likely and very pragmatic from Maryland and from Virginia, lawmakers who you might be partners with on many different issues. You might have same party identification, but out of a concern for the commuter tax, they might say, I just can't be with you on this. And we know the power that an individual senator can have.
Right. And so just like we heard a Republican presidential candidate say, Americans in Washington, D.C. who pay taxes and go to war should be denied because there are too many Democrats. The argument that we should be denied because some people fear what might happen to them is also un-American. And we have to change that way of thinking, just like we were able to change the way of thinking across this country about same-sex marriage. Just like I think what will happen in this country around decisions about the legalization of marijuana and things like that. People's opinions change. And even the people that surround us who are getting elected to office, their opinions change too, because they can no longer, with a straight face, say why American citizens who pay taxes, who are larger than 2 states, who pay more taxes than 20 states, should be any different than they are.
Mike, can I go to line 2 first? I know it's taking the calls out of order, but I see that James has a statehood question, and so if I can skip line 1 and pick up on line 2 and James, go ahead, sir. You're on the air with the mayor. Mayor, James, jump right in, please. James has got the delay situation,
Okay.
so we'll put James back on hold. We'll find him and we'll get him on the air.
Sure.
Can you talk, Mayor, about whether President Obama, who you would think would be wired in terms of his background and his values to get everything you've just laid out without a whole lot of additional explanation needed. I've been on Capitol Hill, I think, for every one of his State of the Union addresses. I don't know that he ever mentioned the district. I don't know that he's been an ally. I don't know that he's done anything. And I would think that potentially that would be a disappointment. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can you, to the extent that I flip that around and make it a question, can you comment on what arguably has been a missed opportunity?
Well, like I said, I think that we would have all been better served if we had a package to put in front of the president in 2008. And I also think he would have been able to pay a lot of attention to it if he weren't facing those very critical issues in the first 2 years when the political winds were a lot more favorable to the issue. But having said that, I think that the president has been helpful in a lot of ways to Washington, D.C. He's been helpful with us. Anything we've needed around schools, he's been extremely supportive of our initiatives. And I think
you don't think he could have done a lot more with his bully pulpit?
I think that a lot of us would have liked to seen a lot more around statehood, on kind of the symbolic things, but also the very real things that will push the issue at the Congress. Now, having said that, the president has worked with the Congress over the last several years that have been unwilling to move anything, and so he has had to make some very sometimes for us unfortunate political calculations that serve the whole presidency. So I don't envy the position that he has been in, and I have been gratified by his leadership. This is an issue that is critically important to us and that we're focused on for the next 4 years. Let's
go back to line 2. I hope we have James there now. James, if so, please jump right in. Hi.
Yes, hello. My question is that if you look at the current U.S. territories and districts, so to speak, that don't have full voting rights, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, they're all majority minority and thus all heavily Democratic. So what I'm asking is, with a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate that by nature doesn't favor getting more Democratic votes, like, what are your hopes of getting full voting rights for all these Americans who have been disenfranchised for political reasons?
I appreciate the different the perspective that James brings.
Sure,
Thank
and
you,
I think that's what we talked about a little bit earlier. And for me, it's not, and we have to challenge the idea that it's okay to say that it's a Democratic or Republican issue to give people who pay taxes voting rights. And so I don't necessarily want to be lumped in with the territories that don't pay taxes. We pay taxes just like Maryland and Virginia or New York or New Jersey, and in fact, we pay more taxes per capita than many states in the union. So our issue is full representation, 2 senators, and having our share of House members that vote.
So that could be on the ballot this year, and I guess it's possible also, shifting gears here, that $15 minimum wage measure could as well. Yes. Where does that stand, and will you be supporting? Will you be backing that?
Well, I am backing a piece of legislation that I sent to the council that will raise the wage to $15 an hour, and it also has a compromised position on the tipped minimum wage. There is a ballot initiative that's being circulated. A group is collecting signatures to get on the ballot that would have a $15 minimum wage in Washington, D.C., plus eliminate tips for tipped workers in the district and require that they be paid $15 an hour. So I differ from the ballot initiative a bit, and I've asked the council to take up my legislation, which instead of eliminating tips for restaurant workers, it would impose a $7.50 minimum wage, and the tip workers would still be able to collect tips.
Do you think, in terms of the ultimate thing we care about as workers, take-home pay, do you think waiters, waitresses, bartenders, etc., would do better under your scenario? I mean, I suppose you
I think that most servers in the district make more than $15 an hour. And so I am concerned about what would happen if we eliminated tips and only allowed them to make the $15 minimum wage. I would be concerned that that would have a negative impact. Now, there are some who won't make that $15, and that's why the $7.50 an hour is a protection for those workers who don't make that much in tips.
And you're working with the council now on
Yes.
the approach you favor. And is that a phased in, as we've seen in other cities?
Yes, it would be phased in. So we would get to $15 for all workers by 2020, as we've seen in other states. And the tipped minimum wage would increase from what it is now, which is $2.77 to $7.50 by 2022.
And I'm guessing that $7.50, if it were to go into effect, would be one of the better tipped wages in the nation. Am I wrong, or do you know?
I think you're probably right. New York City has recently moved around tips. I think in California, in some of the California cities, they've moved around tips as well.
Mayor Bowser, stand by for just a moment. We'll take a break here. We're at the midpoint. Much more of our conversation with and your phone calls for D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser straight ahead. And, of course, great video always online on our blog. It's news8newstalk.com.